Have you ever wondered how men survived when the horizon showed nothing but water for months on end? How did they endure with no fresh markets, no rivers, and no green fields to turn to? The answer lies in the discipline of shipboard life in the 16th century, where every meal, every barrel of water, and every daily routine was part of a careful struggle against hunger, thirst, and fatigue. Survival at sea was not a tale of constant adventure. It was the art of living with less of, making the best of what was available, and of trusting the ship and its crew to carry everyone through. Before we drift into tonight's story, make sure to subscribe so you'll never miss a gentle journey through history. What did these sailors eat? They ate what could last. Provisions were loaded before departure. Salted fish, hard biscuits, dried beans and peas, oats, and sometimes cheese. Why not carry fresh bread or fruit? Because such food spoiled quickly. In the damp, hot air of a ship's hold, within days vegetables rotted, fruit turned soft, and bread grew mold. That is why biscuits baked until rock-hard became the staple. They were so tough that sailors had to soak them in water before biting, and so long-lasting that they often carried insects inside. Did men complain? Certainly. But did they eat them anyway? Yes, because hunger made the choice simple. Chew what you had or go without. And what about water? Surely barrels of water would last. At first they did, but weeks under a blazing sun changed their character. Water grew stale, thick, and sometimes sour. So why not drink freely before it spoiled? Because rationing was essential. Every sailor received a fixed amount, measured by officers, and wasting even a drop could put the entire ship in danger. Washing was almost unknown, for every sip mattered, more to the throat than to the skin. Could the crew ever refresh their supply? Yes, when storms swept across the deck, men stretched out cloths or opened casks to catch rainwater, lifting their faces and mouths to the sky in relief. A sudden downpour was a gift, and for a short time the taste of sweet water replaced the sour. How did sailors spend their days? The answer is, by following a rhythm of watches. The day was divided so that while one group worked, another slept, in hammocks that swung with the ship's motion. What kind of work filled the hours? Men climbed the rigging to adjust sails, spliced ropes, patched worn canvas, and stood at the helm guiding the course. Even when off duty, they mended clothes, repaired gear, or scrubbed decks. Why such constant labor? Because a ship depended on it. A rope left frayed or a sail left torn could mean disaster in a storm. Survival was found in discipline, not in ease. But what about storms? What did sailors feel when the sky darkened and the sea rose in fury? They felt fear, but they acted with speed. Sails were shortened, ropes secured, and men tied themselves to rails to avoid being swept away. Waves smashed across the deck, thunder shook the air, and lightning made the world glow white for heart-stopping moments. Could they do anything? More than hold on? Not really. They endured, gripping ropes until their hands bled, praying only for the storm to pass. And what of calm seas? Were those easier? Strangely, no. When the wind died and the sails hung limp, the ship became a prison, drifting under a merciless sun. Tempers grew short, supplies dwindled, and men waited for the faintest breeze. In storms or in calms, The sea tested them in ways land never could. Did illness strike often? Yes, and it was feared more than storms. Why? Because it spread quietly, weakening men without warning. The most dreaded sickness was scurvy, born from the absence of fresh food. Why did it matter so much? Because it turned strong men into shadows of themselves, gums swollen, teeth loose, old wounds reopening, limbs too weak to climb rigging or haul ropes. Was there a cure? Not on most ships. They endured as best they could, hoping to reach land, before the sickness grew too severe. So how did sailors keep their spirits alive? They leaned on one another. Men who ate from the same pot, pulled the same ropes, and shared the same hardships built trust. Did they quarrel? Of course, but discipline kept the peace. More often they sang songs, told stories, and exchanged jokes in the dim light below. Deck, was this important? Absolutely. Laughter and song mattered as much as food or water, for they gave the crew the strength to endure long days of sameness and long nights of uncertainty. What kept them going through it all? The thought of land? Every sailor longed to hear the lookout cry, "Land ahead." What did that mean to them? It meant fresh food, sweet water, firm earth beneath weary legs, and the end of monotony. Even before land was seen, hints gave hope, a bird overhead, the color of water changing, or a faint outline rising from the horizon. Each sign was a promise that their ordeal was ending. So what does it mean to say sailors survived months at sea in the 16th century? It means they accepted hardship as constant. They ate food that lacked flavor, drank water that tasted sour, and lived with sickness close at hand. Yet they endured. They endured because wages waited at the end, because trade depended on their labor, and because hope of reaching land gave meaning to the trial. Behind every voyage remembered in history stood ordinary men who learned that survival was not in grand adventure, but in quiet patience, steady work, and the will to keep going until the sea gave them back to the shore. Have you ever wondered what it felt like to wake up each day with nothing around you but the same rolling waves, the same creaking timbers, and the same faces of the men you worked beside? How did sailors keep their minds steady when the world shrank to the length and breadth of a single wooden vessel? The answer lies in the rhythm of daily life, a pattern that repeated with such regularity that it became both a comfort and a challenge. What was the first sound a sailor heard in the morning? Often it was not morning at all. Life at sea did not follow the sun as life on land did. Instead, it followed the ship's watches. Time was divided into shifts, each lasting several hours. Bells marked the change, and with each ring, a new group of men climbed from their hammocks while another dropped into them. Did it matter if one was tired or ill? Not really. When a watch was called, duty came first. Men rose at the sound, pulled on clothes that were damp with salt, and stepped out to the deck where the work awaited. And what did that work look like? It was as varied as the sea itself. One man might climb high into the rigging, balancing on swaying ropes to adjust the angle of a sail. Another might be hauling on lines, straining his back and arms as the canvas filled with wind. Someone else might be at the tiller, hands steady on the great lever that guided the ship's path. Were these tasks dangerous? Always. A slip in the rigging could mean a fall into the water, and once a man was lost overboard, the ship rarely turned back. The risk was constant, yet the crew accepted it as part of their trade. What about those not on duty? Did they rest comfortably? Rest was a relative term. The hammocks provided some relief, swinging with the ship's motion, but privacy did not exist. Men slept shoulder to shoulder, with snores, groans, and the sound of the sea filling the air. Was sleep easy? Not always. Heat, vermin, and the constant noise of the ship often interrupted it. Still, men took what rest they could, for fatigue was as dangerous as hunger. Did sailors ever have moments of quiet? Yes, though even these were shaped by necessity. Meal times were shared, often simple affairs with bowls of stew made from beans or peas, or biscuits soft in water. Did they enjoy the food? Enjoyment was not the point. Food was fuel, and meals were about filling the stomach more than pleasing the tongue. Still, men found ways to make the act of eating bearable. They told stories, shared jokes, or sang short songs. Was this important? Very much so. In the monotony of sea life, companionship at meals helped keep despair away. How did men keep the ship itself in order? Every day, ropes had to be inspected, sails checked, and barrels shifted to balance the weight. Did this seem repetitive? Certainly. But why repeat it so often? Because the ocean gave no warning. A rope that looked sound in the morning might snap by evening if left unchecked. A sail that seemed strong could tear under sudden strain. Preventing disaster meant constant vigilance, and so sailors worked as much to maintain the ship as to move it forward. And what of the officers? Did they live differently? They did, to some extent. Officers often had small cabins, offering a measure of privacy. Their meals were sometimes better, with slightly more variety. But did this mean their life was easy? Not at all. The responsibility of guiding the ship, of keeping order among the crew, and of making decisions in storms or calms weighed heavily. If discipline faltered or supplies ran short, the blame fell on them. So while their quarters were different, their burdens were perhaps greater. What did sailors do with rare free moments? They mended their clothes, carved small objects from wood, or simply leaned against the rails staring at the endless water. Did they think of home? Of course. Letters were impossible to send, but thoughts of families, fields, or familiar streets filled the mind. Did such longing make the voyage harder? Yes, but it also gave purpose. The idea of returning home, of placing coins in the hand of a waiting wife or parent, gave meaning to the months away. How did the constant closeness of crew life affect them? It could lead to quarrels, for tempers frayed when men were trapped together, with no escape. But what happened when quarrels rose too high? Discipline intervened. The officers maintained strict rules, not out of cruelty, but because order was essential. Could a ship survive if men fought openly? No. Unity was as important as sails or rudder, and so disputes were controlled before they threatened the whole. And through it all, what sound marked the passing hours? The steady ringing of the ship's bell. Each ring signaled not only a change of watch, but a reminder that time was moving, however slowly. Did sailors resent its sound? Perhaps sometimes when it called them from sleep or ordered them to labor, but did it also comfort them? Yes, because each ring also meant they were one step closer to land, one step closer to ending the long voyage. So what was the daily rhythm? of shipboard life. It was a pattern of work and rest, of duty and endurance, repeated until days blurred together. Was it easy? No. Was it survivable? Yes, if a man accepted its demands. This rhythm carried sailors through, not because it offered excitement, but because it provided structure in a world otherwise without boundaries. The sea was endless, the horizon unchanging, but the bell, the watch, and the shared labor gave shape to existence. And in that structure lay the secret of endurance. Have you ever imagined standing on the deck of a ship, staring in every direction and seeing nothing but water? No land, no trees, no villages, only the rolling of waves and the endless horizon. What did such a sight do to the mind of a sailor? In the 16th century? At first, perhaps it was awe. But as days turned into weeks, that same horizon became a heavy weight. How did men endure the vast emptiness? The answer lay in learning to see the sea not as emptiness, but as a world of its own, full of patterns, dangers, and moments of quiet beauty. What did sailors notice first? The color of the water. Was it always the same? No. Some days it glimmered blue under the sun, other days it turned gray beneath clouds, and in storms it darkened into a threatening black. Did these changes matter? Yes, because they told sailors about the weather, about approaching winds, and about the conditions they would soon face. The sea was both their path and their enemy, and learning to read its moods was part of survival. Did they ever fear the depth beneath them? How could they not? The ocean stretched deeper than any line could measure, and they knew that beneath their wooden vessel lay miles of water, dark and unknown. Was it wise to think too much about it? Probably not. Most sailors pushed such thoughts aside, focusing instead on the tasks at hand. Yet in quiet moments some surely wondered what lay below, creatures unseen, mysteries never touched by light. Did these thoughts disturb their sleep? Sometimes, but discipline and fatigue often won over imagination. What dangers did the endless sea hold? Storms, of course, but also calms. Could stillness be as deadly as fury? Yes. When the wind died, the ship became a prison. Supplies dwindled, and men grew restless under the heat. Was there any way to escape such a trap? None but patience. They waited for the breeze, scanning the horizon for ripples that promised movement. Some watched birds in the hope that their flight meant land nearby, but often the birds vanished, again leaving only disappointment. And what of storms? What was it like to be caught in one? It was like being inside a drum of thunder and water. Waves smashed against the hull, sails strained and cracked, and the deck became a river of sea-water, rushing from side to side. Did men fear for their lives? Certainly. But did they abandon their posts? No. Each man had a place, a duty, and if he failed it, the ship might be lost. Survival in a storm was not about courage alone, but about trust. Trust that the man beside you would hold the rope as tightly as you held yours. Were there moments of calm beauty? Yes, and these mattered as much as survival. On some evenings the sea turned silver under the moonlight, so smooth it seemed the ship was floating. On glass? Did sailors pause to notice? They did, for even weary men could not help but look up at the stars, countless and bright, guiding their way. Did they feel small beneath that sky? Of course. But did that smallness bring despair? Not always. Sometimes it brought comfort, reminding them that the sea, though vast, was part of a greater order, and that ships had crossed it before, and would cross it again. How did sailors speak of the sea among themselves? With both respect and complaint. They cursed its storms, grumbled at its calms, and yet they knew their lives depended on it. Could they love the sea? In their own way, yes, for though it punished them, it also carried them to new lands, new wages, and the promise of return. Without the sea, their work would not exist. So they lived in a strange balance, both hating its hardships and depending on its path. And what happened when the endless horizon finally began to change? A bird appeared, flying low. A branch floated past, carried by a distant current. The water shifted in color, telling of shallows ahead. Did these small signs matter? They mattered more than words can say, for each hint of land was a promise that the endless sea would not last forever. The men grew alert, eyes sharper, voices quicker, as hope rose with every sign. So what did it mean to face the endless sea? It meant to endure its silence and its roar, its calm and its rage. It meant to live with the knowledge that nothing separated you from death but wood and rope. And yet it also meant learning patience, finding beauty in the stars, and trusting that beyond the horizon waited the solid ground of another shore. The endless sea was both a trial and a teacher, and those who faced it carried its lessons long after they stepped back onto land. If you're enjoying this quiet stroll through history, don't forget to subscribe for more peaceful stories like this. Have you ever asked yourself what it felt like to be ill on a ship with no doctor, no pharmacy, and no chance of reaching help for weeks or even months? How did sailors endure sickness when their world was nothing but wood and waves? The truth is that health was as fragile as the rigging above their heads, and every voyage carried with it the quiet fear of disease and weakness. What kinds of sickness did they face most often? At the simplest level, stomach complaints were constant. The salted fish, hard biscuits, and stale water often left bellies cramping and men groaning. Was this surprising? Not at all. Food and drink that had sat in barrels for weeks were bound to trouble the body. Yet the men ate because hunger offered no choice, and they learned to live with discomfort as part of their trade. But what about wounds and injuries? A ship was full of hazards, heavy ropes that could snap suddenly, blocks and pulleys that swung with force, and ladders that rose high above the deck. Did sailors get hurt often? Yes, a slip on wet planks could bruise or break bones, and a fall from the rigging could end a life in a moment. How were such injuries treated with whatever was at hand? A cloth might be bound tightly around a cut, a splint fashioned from wood for a broken limb. Were these cures perfect? Hardly. Many wounds festered in the damp, salt-laden air, leaving. Scars are worse. Yet men carried on, because there was no other choice. And then there was scurvy, the most dreaded illness of long voyages. What was it? And why did it matter so much? Scurvy was the result of going without fresh fruits or vegetables, a slow and cruel disease that began with fatigue and ended with bleeding gums, loose teeth, and terrible weakness. Could it be avoided? At the time, sailors did not fully understand. How? Some captains tried bringing along preserved lemons or dried herbs, but most ships sailed with no real remedy. Was scurvy feared? Deeply. It crept in quietly, and before long men who had once climbed ropes with ease could barely rise from. Their hammocks. Were there other ailments? Yes. Fevers spread quickly in the crowded, unwashed conditions below deck. Skin infections, rashes, and sores were common. The close quarters meant that once one man fell ill, others soon followed. Did this frighten the crew? Of course. Disease was an invisible enemy, harder to fight than storms or calms, and it could strike even in the quietest weather. So how did sailors keep themselves alive? By clinging to small habits. They rinsed their mouths with what water they could. Spare, they aired their hammocks on deck when the sun shone, and they scraped away dirt and grime from their clothes. Were these measures enough? Not always, but they gave a sense of control, and that mattered. Did companionship help? Yes, more. Than most things. Men encouraged one another, shared their meager rations, and supported those who grew weak. In such close spaces, survival was not only physical but also emotional. Was there any comfort in sickness at sea? Perhaps only this, that suffering was shared. Every man knew that illness might come for him next, and so harsh judgment was rare. Instead, sympathy grew and the bonds of the crew deepened. Did that ease the pain? Not entirely, but it gave men the will to fight for another day. So what did it mean to face sickness at sea? It meant to live with constant risk, to endure pain without medicine, and to watch comrades falter while still carrying on. It meant learning that survival was not always about strength of body, but about strength of spirit, the will to rise from the hammock, to grip the rope once more, and to trust that land would come before life gave out. Sickness at sea was the great shadow of every voyage, but even in its darkest hours, sailors endured, proving that patience, hope, and companionship could carry them further than they ever imagined. Have you ever wondered how sailors, exhausted by storms, hunger, and endless labor, found any sense of rest on their long voyages? How could men, confined to a crowded wooden ship, always damp and noisy, carve out even the smallest comfort? The answer is that rest was not about luxury, but about seizing brief moments of peace wherever they could be found, and even the simplest habit became a treasure. Where did they sleep? Not in beds or cabins, but in hammocks slung between beams. Why hammocks? Because they swayed with the ship, cradling the sleeper and preventing falls in rough seas. Were they comfortable? Only compared to the hard deck below. The cloth often stayed damp from salt air, and vermin sometimes crept in. Did the men complain? Yes, but they also valued the hammock's one gift, the chance to close their eyes and let the ship's rocking bring them a little rest. Was sleep peaceful? Rarely. The ship was never silent. Waves slapped against the hull, sails cracked in the wind, and ropes groaned under tension. Above, boots thudded as men on duty moved about. Snores and coughs filled the air below deck. Could a sailor truly rest in such conditions? He rested because he had to. Fatigue was dangerous, and even a short, broken sleep was better than none. What about food? Did meals bring comfort? In their own way, yes. The dishes were plain, often little more than a stew of peas or beans, or a biscuit softened in water. Did it taste good? Seldom. But did it give the crew a moment to gather, to sit together, to share a laugh? Absolutely. Even the poorest meal became a small anchor of routine, and routine was comfort when the days blurred together. Did sailors have ways to ease boredom? They did. Some carved small figures or tools from scraps of wood. Others knotted rope into decorative patterns or repaired worn clothing with care. Did these activities matter? More than it might seem. They filled the idle hours, distracted the mind from hunger or fear, and gave men a sense of purpose beyond their assigned duties. Were songs part of their rest? Yes, and more than that, they were a lifeline. Men sang as they worked the ropes, but they also sang in quieter hours, trading verses, humming familiar tunes, or inventing new ones. Did this lighten their burdens? It did, for music softened the weight of the sea's silence. A song could turn grumbling into laughter and exhaustion into endurance. What about companionship? Was that a comfort, too? Perhaps the greatest one. Sailors leaned on each other, told tales of their homes, imagined the foods and fields they missed, and shared hopes of what they might see in new lands. Did these conversations ease the trials? Yes, because in speaking of the world beyond the horizon, they reminded themselves that the voyage would end and life would continue ashore. Could a man find solitude? Almost never. Privacy was unknown on a crowded ship, but did this mean there was no peace? Not entirely. Some men found it in leaning against the rail during night watch, staring at the stars and listening to the whisper of waves. Was that moment of stillness enough? For many, it was. Even a few minutes of quiet reflection gave strength to face the next day. So what did rest and comfort look like at sea? Not luxury, not softness, but small mercies, a swinging hammock, a warm stew, a carved trinket, a shared song, or a quiet glance at the stars. These were fragile things, yet they mattered more than gold. They gave weary sailors the ability to rise again, to grip the rope, to hold the sail, and to endure the long months until land returned. Have you ever wondered how a ship full of weary men, cramped into a space smaller than most village squares, managed to function without falling into chaos? How did order survive when tempers were short, when food was poor, and when the sea offered no escape? The answer is that discipline was the backbone of every voyage. Without strict rules, a ship could not survive a week at sea, and every sailor knew it. Who enforced this discipline? The officers, led by the captain. Was the captain's word absolute? Yes, for on the open sea there could be no debate or delay. Why? Because hesitation could mean disaster. A storm did not wait for a crew to argue, nor did a snapping rope pause while men discussed their options. A clear voice giving clear orders was the only way to keep the ship alive. Did sailors always like this authority? Rarely. But did they accept it? They did, because survival demanded it. What happened if a man disobeyed orders? Punishments were swift. A sailor might lose rations, be tied and left exposed on deck, or in severe cases feel the sting of the rope's end across his back. Were such punishments harsh? By our eyes, yes, but by theirs they were necessary. Could a ship sail if men ignored their officers? No. Order was the thin line that kept the vessel from ruin. Did sailors resent this discipline? Sometimes. Long hours of labor, hunger, and exhaustion made tempers rise. But what was the alternative? Disorder. Without rules, the sails would be left untended, the ropes uncoiled, and the tiller unmanned. The ship would drift, supplies would be wasted, and quarrels would tear the crew apart. So even those who grumbled quietly still obeyed, for they valued their lives too much to risk them on defiance. Were there rules beyond work? Yes, rules about cleanliness, about rationing, about where hammocks could be hung, and even about when men could gather. Why so many rules? Because on a ship every small detail affected the whole. A dirty deck could cause disease, and unbalanced load of barrels could tip the ship, and wasted food could mean starvation later. Discipline touched every corner of life because every corner mattered. Did discipline create unity? In its way, yes. Men understood that they all lived or died together, and the rules applied to everyone. Officers gave orders, but they also carried responsibilities. The crew might dislike them, but they knew the ship could not sail without them. Did this sense of order bring comfort? Surprisingly, it did. In a world of uncertainty, storms, illness, endless seas, the firm voice of an officer and the sound of a bell marking the watch gave shape to each day. And what of trust? Was discipline only about fear? No, it was also about trust. Trust that the man beside you would obey his duty. Trust that the officer knew the ship's needs, and trust that order itself would carry them safely to land. Without that trust, panic would replace patience, and panic was as deadly as any storm. So what did discipline mean to sailors of the 16th century? It meant order where chaos might otherwise reign. It meant that one man's voice could guide many hands. That punishment reminded men of their duties, and that structure replaced fear. Life at sea was never gentle, but with discipline it was at least steady. And in that steadiness lay the hope of survival, for no ship could endure the ocean without the hard but necessary gift of order. Have you ever wondered what it truly felt like to live on a ship, not in stories of battle or discovery, but in the ordinary moments that filled each day? What did the sailors see, hear, and feel as they moved through the endless weeks at sea? The answer lies not only in grand events, but in the small details that shape their world: the creak of timber, the sting of salt, the smell of tar, and the sight of endless horizons that both comforted and unsettled the mind. What was the first thing a sailor noticed each morning, if it could be called morning at all? The light filtering down through the hatch, dim and uncertain, accompanied by the swaying of his hammock. Did the ship ever stop moving? Never. Even in calm waters, it rocked gently, and men learned to balance their bodies with its rhythm. Was this motion comforting or exhausting? At first it could sicken newcomers, but in time it became second nature, a cradle that rocked them to restless sleep and guided their steps across shifting planks. What did they smell? The sea carried its own scents: sharp salt in the air, the damp wood of the deck, and the heavy odor of tar used to seal ropes. And planks. Did these smells fade? No, they grew stronger with time, mingling with the smell of men crowded together, sweat clinging to clothes seldom washed. Was it pleasant? Rarely, but it was the air of survival, and sailors grew accustomed to it until it became invisible to their senses. What sounds filled their ears? Above all, the groan of the ship itself. The hull creaked like a living thing, planks straining with each wave. Sails cracked as the wind shifted, ropes hummed under tension, and blocks rattled against the masts. Did these noises trouble the sailors? At first, yes, for his ship never fell silent. But soon the sounds became familiar, a kind of language that told them if the ship was steady or if something was wrong. Could an experienced sailor wake at the sound of a rope snapping? Indeed, many did, for they knew the difference between the normal chorus of the sea and the sudden cry of trouble. What did they see when they looked outward? The horizon, unbroken and vast. By day the waves stretched in every direction, glimmering blue or gray. By night the stars glittered like lanterns across the heavens. Did these sights ever grow dull? Sometimes, yes. The monotony weighed heavily, making days blend together. But at other times a sunrise spreading golden light across the waves could lift weary spirits, or the sudden leap of a fish could bring shouts of surprise and laughter. Were there marvels? Yes, dolphins that raced alongside the ship, their sleek bodies gliding through the water, or schools of flying fish that burst from the waves like silver arrows. These moments reminded the sailors that the sea was alive, not only a barrier but a world of creatures unseen. What did the sea feel like against their skin? Salt clung to everything. Spray stung their faces, and the wind whipped against them, burning in the cold and suffocating in the heat. Did their clothes stay dry? Almost never. Dampness soaked in too. Fabric stiffened it with salt and left skin raw. Did they grow used to it? They did, for they had no choice. Sailors toughened until discomfort became normal, their hands calloused from rope, their feet hardened against wet planks. And what of the taste? It was in the food, in the water, in the very air. Salt crept into everything, dulling flavors, coating lips, and reminding men with every swallow that they were far from fresh springs and fertile fields. Did they long for the taste of home? Every day. But they swallowed what was given, grateful for sustenance, no matter how poor. So what did the sailors truly experience through their senses? A world of constant sound, smell, sight, and touch, unchanging, yet always demanding attention. The sea filled their ears with creaks and crashes, their noses with tar and salt, their eyes with horizons, and their skin with spray. It was not a gentle world, but it was their world. And though many longed for the comfort of land, these sensations became the fabric of their days, the background against which survival was written. Have you ever wondered what it was like to face the moods of the sea with nothing but wooden planks and canvas between you and disaster? How did sailors endure the sudden fury of storms or the cruel stillness of calms that stretched for days? The truth is that nature was the greatest master of every voyage, and men learned quickly that their survival depended on respect, patience, and the ability to endure both rage and silence. What was it like when a storm began? At first, perhaps, only a shift in the wind, a darkening of the horizon, or a low rumble of thunder far away. Did sailors fear these early signs? They did, but they also acted swiftly, for hesitation could mean catastrophe. Sails were reefed, ropes tightened, and every man knew his place. When the storm struck in full, the ship became a living, groaning beast, timbers bending under the assault of wind and water. Was fear present? Always. But so too was discipline. Men clung to ropes as waves swept across the deck, lightning split the sky, and thunder shook their bones. Could they do anything more than hold fast? No, they endured, waiting for the storm's fury to exhaust itself. And what of the aftermath? Was it relief? Yes, but also exhaustion. Muscles ached, hands bled, and hammocks offered only shallow rest. Yet men smiled faintly, for they had survived. Did the storm leave damage? Often. Torn sails, snapped ropes, and sometimes even broken masts. Repairs began at once, for the sea offered no pause. Survival meant rising after hardship and preparing for the next blow. But storms were not the only trial. What about calms, when the wind vanished? Were they easier? Strangely, no. The ship lay still, sails drooping like lifeless cloth, and the sun beat down with merciless heat. Did tempers fray? Yes, for men grew restless when days passed without movement. Supplies dwindled, water soured, and boredom gnawed as surely as hunger. Could the crew do anything? Nothing but wait. Some prayed for wind, others stared endlessly at the horizon while officers kept order with firm voices. Was this waiting harder than fighting storms? In many ways, yes, for storms brought action, but calms brought helplessness. Did sailors ever see beauty in these trials? Sometimes. Between storms the sea could glitter in colors beyond description, silver at dawn and crimson at sunset. In calms the water turned so smooth it reflected the sky like a mirror, and dolphins or flying fish leapt alongside the motionless ship. Did these moments ease their suffering? They did, reminding the men that the sea was not only cruel, but also wondrous, a place of marvel as well as hardship. So how did sailors endure storms and calms alike? With patience and with trust, patience to wait for nature to change, and trust that their ship, their officers, and their crewmates would see them through. Was it courage that carried them? Not always. Often it was simply habit, the discipline of men who had faced these trials before and knew they must face them again. What lesson did these experiences teach? That the sea was a power beyond control, one to be endured rather than conquered. A storm could terrify, a calm could torment, but both passed in time, and those who survived carried the memory, not only of hardship, but of the strength found in enduring it. Let's pause for just a moment, and if you haven't already, subscribe to join us for more calm stories. Have you ever wondered how sailors in the 16th century knew where they were going when no roads guided them and no landmarks stood to point the way? How did they manage to cross oceans when every horizon looked the same, only water stretching endlessly in all directions? The answer is that they relied on tools, skills, and memory, blending careful observation with the instruments of their time. Navigation was less about certainty and more about confidence, built from experience passed down by those who had sailed before. What tools did they use? The most important were the compass and the charts. Did the compass give them every answer? Not quite. It showed direction, pointing steadily north, but it could not tell them how far they had traveled or how close they were to land. So how did they measure distance? By dead reckoning, a method of estimating their position based on speed, time, and direction. Was it precise? Rarely. But with steady record-keeping, it gave a workable sense of progress. How did they know their speed? By casting a log line, a rope with knots tied at measured intervals, dropped into the water while a sandglass was turned. As the ship moved forward, sailors counted the knots that slipped through their hands before the sand ran out. Was this why speed at sea was measured in knots? Yes, and though the method was simple, it gave sailors a way to track their pace across the ocean. Did they also use the sun and stars? Certainly. By day, the sun's path across the sky gave them direction, and with instruments like the cross staff or astrolabe, helped them measure latitude, their distance north or south of the equator. At night, sailors looked to the stars, fixed points that guided their course when the compass was doubted. Could they always see the sky? No. Clouds and storms often hid it, leaving them blind for days. In such times they trusted their charts and their sense of distance, hoping their reckoning remained true. What about the coastline? When near land, pilots who knew the waters became invaluable. Did every captain have such a pilot? When possible, yes. These men recognized the shape of shores, the color of water above shallows, and the pattern of currents near harbors. Could mistakes be made? Often. A hidden reef, an unseen shoal, or a misjudged current could shatter a ship against rocks in an instant. Was fear of grounding constant? Absolutely, for many ships were lost, not in the deep ocean, but near the very land they sought. How did sailors feel about this uncertainty? With patience and caution. Did they sometimes argue over direction? Yes, but the captain's decision was final. Was every voyage successful? No, some ships vanished, their paths misjudged, their fate unknown. But many reached their destination, guided by a blend of skill, memory, and trust in the tools they carried. So what was navigation in the 16th century? It was part science, part art, and part endurance. It relied on compasses, charts, knots, and stars, but also on the steady hands of men who kept the log, turned the sandglass, and recorded each day's progress. Was it easy? Never. But did it work? Often enough to carry ships across oceans, linking lands that had once seemed forever apart. In this way, sailors did not conquer the sea, but learned to move across it, step by step, knot by knot, until land rose again on the horizon. Have you ever wondered what it felt like for a sailor, after endless weeks surrounded only by waves, to finally see the line of land on the horizon? How did months of hardship and patience transform into the joy of return? The closing moments of a voyage were more than the end of a journey. They were a reminder of why men endured the sea at all. What was the first sign? Sometimes a bird flying low, sometimes a branch drifting past, sometimes the faintest change in the color of the water. Did these small signs stir the crew? Yes, for they were whispers of land. Men rushed to the rails, eyes straining, hearts lifting at the possibility that the sea was finally giving them back to the earth. And when the lookout shouted, "Land ahead," what happened then? Joy erupted. Even the weariest sailor found new strength, and laughter spread across faces that had long carried fatigue. What did land mean to them? Fresh food, clear water, solid ground beneath unsteady legs. It meant rest from the endless rocking, freedom from stale biscuits and sour casks, relief from cramped hammocks and ceaseless watches. Did it also mean pride? Yes, for surviving the sea was no small feat. Each man had faced storms, sickness, monotony, and danger. Yet here they were, proof that endurance could carry them through. Did the hardships fade instantly? Not entirely. Scars remained, memories of hunger and pain lingered, and some friends were missing, lost along the way. But did these memories overshadow the return? No, in that moment the sight of land outweighed all else. The cries of gulls overhead, the smell of earth carried by, the wind and the steady approach of a familiar harbor made every trial worthwhile. So what did the return teach them? That the sea was both a punisher and a provider. It demanded patience, discipline, and sacrifice, but it also gave wages, trade, and stories that would be told for a lifetime. Was every man eager to sail again? Some were driven by duty or the call of adventure. Others longed only to remain ashore. Yet all shared the same truth, that survival was a triumph in itself, a testament to endurance over fear. And what lesson do we take from their journeys? That human strength often lies not in grand victories, but in the quiet decision to carry on each day. The sailors of the 16th century did not live lives of ease, yet they endured because they held fast to hope, to order, and to one another. When land appeared, it was not only a shore they saw, but the proof that patience, discipline, and fellowship could turn even the most endless voyage into a story of survival.